Hey everybody, it's Nathan from Savage Lands News, and this time we are joined by a local child prodigy of my area. His name is Jude, and he has been a absolute menace in the Pacific Northwest for quite a long time. And unfortunately for everybody around him, he was a filthy Dromai player. But I did always promise him that if he hit that top 8, if he won a pro quest, if he got his name on Dromai's Living Legend points, that I'd pull him on the channel. And it just so happened that he did it right now, this last weekend.
Last day that I could ever get her points.
The last day he could ever get her points. So everybody give Jude a round of applause. Thanks for coming on the channel, Jude. How you doing today, buddy?
It's going pretty good. I actually, now that Dromai's gone, I have to play a new deck, and I've been delving pretty deep into Rhinar. So we'll see how that goes. We'll have to see how the new illusionist plays, but as of right now, I'm on that Brew Life.
Yeah, he's joined the Rhinar fan club of the Pacific Northwest. It's amazing. If you get your name on Rhinar before Sean does, how would that make you feel?
That'd be amazing. It'd be amazing.
It would be amazing. For all of you at home, Sean is in our Discord. His name is Never. He was on the channel before. He played Rhea Adams in the I've Never Lost to Icelander in My Life challenge. But yeah, Sean and Jude are kind of like a little package deal up here. You guys have been locals to our shop for like the last 2 years, I would say.
Less than that even. Like,
year and a half?
I started playing a little bit less than a year and a half ago, and then I got Sean in less than a year ago.
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah.
Pretty new, huh? I thought it was longer than that. I guess time flies, right? So let's give us a rundown. How did you end up on the Dromai path? Like, what was it about Dromai that really made you a player?
So really what it was is that I was a longtime Magic player before I played Flesh and Blood. So I started playing Flesh and Blood a little bit less than a year and a half ago, but before that I played Magic from like a really young age. Like I got taught to play Magic when I was 6. And I've basically been playing Magic until when I started picking up Flesh and Blood. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but a lot of people might say that Dromai is kind of similar to playing Magic in the context of Flesh and Blood. And so Dromai was the first ever Blitz deck I ever picked up. My first couple armories, I actually ended up playing Briar. But after a point, it was really, Dromai really clicked with me. And I just started taking tour events and doing quite well. And so I've basically been on Dromai ever since, except for when she LL'd a couple weeks ago, unfortunately.
I remember when you were first in the shop, Portland Game Store, and I like met you for the first time, and you were playing Dromai, but you had like no legendary Dromai. You know, you're on like basically as cheap as you could possibly make the deck. And I was on like, that was when I was in my like glory days, you know, like I was on top of the meta right then. I was like really killing it with Rhinar, and then I played you and I thought it was just gonna, you know, I was trying to explain the game maybe to you a little bit, and we got like halfway through and I was like, this guy's gonna beat me if I don't play for real right now. And it was like your first or second time in that shop that I'd ever seen you. So I knew from the beginning. I told my crew in Vancouver, I was like, Jude's gonna be good. Like this guy's good, you know. So it's cool to see you finally, like, you know, you did pretty well at some major events too, right? You had some decent placements.
So yeah, my first major was I played in US Nationals 2023, and I didn't make into the money for that one, but I went 9-5, mostly just doing pretty poorly in draft, but I went 6-2 in CC. I got high rolled pretty bad by Alexi, and then at that time, like Dory, like Dawnblade Dory was like my absolute kryptonite. And I faced one of those. But I ended up I went 4-0 day 2 of CC. So I felt pretty proud of that. And that was a lot of why I kept playing Dromai, even through that like Lexi meta.
Yeah, you were doing pretty good. And then you went on a tear. And then recently, right, like you've kind of been a killer in the Northwest area. You're always doing really well at our Pro Quests, our RTNs, you know, like placing pretty well at our Battle Hardens, like pretty much a menace. That's good. So, you know, I guess with Dromai being similar to Magic, have you tried the new Prism?
I have tried Prism a bit. I don't love her. I think it's more so just that like not starting at 40 health is really tough, and having half of your deck not block is really tough as well. Like Ward kind of fixes that to a degree, but it's pretty rough. Where a lot of the play patterns that I really like with Dromai is I set up this board of 3 or 4 dragons. if you want to attack me, I can block with 3 or 4 cards in my hand, even if I have like an arsenal, and then just send back this like incredibly powerful 1-card hand and punish you if you don't exactly have a popper multiple turns in a row and you're able to like keep up the pressure. And so I've tried it out a bit, but we'll see. Right now, I'm really liking Rhinar, so you know, we'll see how it develops from there.
I guess the new Prism also isn't really a board state character unless you count ALS, right? Like, sure, she has like the auras, but like that's not really what she's killing you with as much. It's more of like, I guess the angels, but like most of the time she's generating her value from attacking. You know what I mean? It feels like, right?
Angels and heralds are mostly what's killing you, especially on builds that aren't really on Iris or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about the new illusionist? Because her hero ability is kind of interesting.
Yeah, she's pretty interesting to me. Having 40 health, also pretty nice. A lot of blues, like the Iris style of gameplay is something that I'm definitely pretty interested in. My gold foil from the ProQuest that I won was an Iris of Reality. So I'm hoping to get some use out of that.
That's actually kind of cool. That matches that seems like that might be her weapon too, kind of.
Yeah,
it's a blue base deck.
She's getting a new one. I think they've spoiled that at this point, but I don't know exactly whether that'll be what's played or whether people will just stick to Iris.
Yeah, especially as a blue illusionist, right? And she definitely has spectral shield in like in interactions of some kind. So yeah, it would make sense for Iris to be good. Okay, so I mean, I guess right now before we dive into your deck list, you know, I mean, she is LL'd, so we're gonna go over like why you picked the cards you did, how you did well in the meta. But you know, it would be really interesting. Like, what version of Rhinar are you running right now?
Rhinar? Oh yeah. So right now I'm playing a list that's pretty similar to Paulo Ventora's build. I've been messing around with that quite a bit. I like agility, but really when I've dabbled in Rhinar before, it's really just been, I really enjoy having decks that have a lot of 3 blocks and decks that have a lot of like defense reactions, like 0-4s. I love those. And so I basically took Pablo's list and I changed a couple cards around. The main difference, like I like cut the unmovables and I'm like, we can't beat Azalea without unmovable. We're putting back that in unmovable. Yeah. Right now, the biggest difference between my list and his is I've cut Massacre for Skullcrack just to have more consistent Blood Rush turns. Okay. But overall it's very similar to Pablo's list.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to change that one. You know, the Intimidate strategy is like really strong, right? Like you start in the game with like 20 extra health over your opponent because of how much damage you'll do on one turn. It's really cool. I've been experimenting a little bit more recently with a pump Rhinar because I don't think it's good right this second, but with the new CNC light card that's coming in the KO set, and you know, the cards like Sand Packing and these, they're basically brute cards, right? Like they're, for the first time we have CNC on hitty style brute cards. Things like a +3 is actually like really devastating because it's pretty hard to give CNC a plus, you know, like unless you're pummeling it really. So sending a Send Packing for like 9 or 12 is actually kind of wild.
Yeah, I've heard you talking about Awakening Bellow in the Discord.
Yeah, Awakening Bellow, because it'll fit the curve of the new 2-cost one super perfectly, right? That's really what got my brain thinking about it, was like that. And if you also think about it like pack call or pack hunt, if you send Awakening Bellow and pack hunt, it's Alpha Rampage.
Yeah, but it's just more, it's the same thing as like Show No Mercy to a degree, where it's like Show No Mercy with barraging is just Alpha Rampage, but you can also play it as a 2-card hand. Whereas if you Arsenal Alpha, it can just lose you the game because it gets stuck in your arsenal for the rest of the game.
Exactly. So I was thinking like there might be maybe cutting the barragings and going for pumping cards. So like that would be like, I don't know, obviously Awakening Bellow, but like lead with speed, but maybe the strength version or like whatever, and building a 2-cost deck that pumps itself up, because it's like it's kind of on rate, and then you can still Blood Rush. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Blood Rush is broken.
Yeah,
Blood Rush and Rhinar are more broken.
As soon as KOLLs, I think the brutes are gonna have their, for the first ever time, like really big class or hero disparities. Like I think that's when you're gonna start seeing like LSS being able to like play with cards a little bit heavier in the brutes. Because right now it's like, does it work with Blood Rush too well? We can't print it, and Levaya, KO, and Rhinar kind of just feel like Blood Rush heroes. You know, like there's, even though they're so different, they play like Blood Rush heroes. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of it. So I'm excited to see that future. But let's dive into your list real quick because you know, I think it's time to talk Dromai and see how you managed to crack a PQ win in the middle of a brute season. Let's see. Okay, so we got Jude's list in front of us, and you're gonna see there's actually quite a few cards that I didn't expect to see in this list, so I'm really excited to talk about it. You know, granted, Dromai's gone now, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's not going to be a new version of her. I also think with how popular dragons are, and I do think they're relatively well designed, relatively. You know, I think there's some things you could do definitely to change Dromai a little bit to make her a little bit more fair, especially in the new meta of, or the new world of Flesh and Blood. But I don't think she's gone forever. You know what I mean? I feel like she's gonna come back. Like, there's no way you can let a card as cool as Tomotai just never be played again. You know? Although granted, that's the card I have the most problems with. So we're just saying. But let's start with your equipment, because I think the interesting thing is you are on kind of like a version of Empress Dromai, right?
Yeah, and so the big difference between this list and the list that I actually ended up bringing to the Pro Tour was that my Pro Tour list ran 3 crowns. It ran Crown of Dominion, it ran Crown of Providence, and it ran Balance of Justice.
Oh, wow.
And whereas this list is only on 1. And so the key with that is basically, it's not really about the sideboard space, it's just that Tome is an incredibly powerful card, and we want to be proactive in so many of our matchups that playing Tome of Imperial Flame is just going to get us ahead, get us that starting board of dragons, and then the sooner that we can get into that mode of block 9, play 1 red card, attack with my entire board for 12 to 15 value, the sooner we're going to win the game, basically.
Yeah.
And Tome is really just an absurd card. Every time you play Tome, you're basically going +1 card over what you would normally be able to do, because you get 2 Ash, which is what you would get from pitching 2 cards, and you get 3 resources, which, depending on how you sequence it, is usually what you can get out of 2 cards between Flamescale Furnace. And it gives all your dragons go again, which is just incredibly powerful. And so basically, my game plan at the Pro Tour in Takeo was play Balance of Justice and choose to go second and try and tempo them if I win the die roll. And so I played against Via Fam, actually, at the Pro Tour, and I went balancing him, and I went second, and I got absolutely smashed because I wasn't able to set up a board state efficiently enough, basically, because I would like play an Uvia, and I'm like taking 8 damage to play this Uvia, and like they have to respect my board to a degree, but they can also kind of just ignore it. And so with Crown Dominion, they aren't really able to ignore it because you just set it up so much faster, basically.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like turbo mode, you know. Huh. And then the rest of your equipment, I mean, you've got Silken Form, Seeker's Mitts. I mean, like, what's really like the determining factor here? Is
so Silken Form is, it took a lot of players a long time to realize this, but Silken Form is basically just Northern Gloves. Other than in exactly the Mirror and sometimes Dorinthia, because it's pretty good into like attack reactions with Dawnblade. You're basically only playing this as Northern Gloves that after Kano like shoots you, you can then turn it into an Ashwing and increase your clock. Because basically it AB1s the turn that you want to AB, and then you turn it into an Ashwing, and then the Ashwing has AB1. And then for Seeker's Mitts versus Wave of Reality, basically it's just, am I going first? Do I want Wave of Reality because it gives me 2 extra block? And am I going second? I want Seeker's Mitts because I want to be able to make Ash on my opponent's first turn so that I can start playing dragons on my first turn without playing inefficiently.
That's great. That's crazy that you dedicate 3 gloves, right? Like, so the marginal difference between Wave of Reality and Seeker's Mitts is like a warrants card, you think?
Yeah, so pretty much it's that I want Seeker's Mitts. Actually, I was running no Wave of Reality for a while back before Crown of Dominion. But the thing is that with Crown of Dominion, when you're going first, it's super easy to go pop a gold, make 2 Ash, draw a card, play a 1-cost dragon, and then still end with an arsenal. And basically, on turn 0, going first, you're able to make 2 Ash and a 1-cost dragon on first turn of the game. And getting that extra 2 value, basically every game that you go first, kind of adds up, especially because for the most part, Dromai can afford to like have a little, because basically because a lot of her cards are so good in so many matchups, you don't need as big of a sideboard. And Wave of Reality basically just saying you gain 2 life while spending no cards out of your hand. Because for Dromai, it's less so about cards out of deck and more so about cards out of hand. Just like getting 2 life for free at the start of every game as like more damage that you can take to just like set up your board of dragons that will eventually kill your opponent. Most of the time, it ends up being worth it.
That makes sense. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy because you see a lot of other people, like a lot of other decks, they're like they're so tight on spots, they're like trying to cut equipment. You know what I mean? And you have 3 gloves, 2 boots, right? So it's kind of like a very different story. And then you've got Snapdragons and Mage Masters. What is it? Is Snapdragons for aggro, Mage Masters for popping decks, or like what's the difference?
So it's a little bit different. So for a long time, Mage Masters was the card that I wasn't running for the Pro Tour, right? So before I was running Snapdragons into every single matchup. The reason why you want Mage Master boots is because on tome turns, it makes Passing Mirage, rather than it being a liability, it makes Passing Mirage basically one of the best cards in your deck. Because what you're able to do is you're able to go tome, draw 2, pitch 2, activate Flame Scale. You're now up to 3 resources. You can then go Mage Master Boots, Passing Mirage, basically going from 3 copies of Mirror Guy in your deck to going up to 6 copies of Mirror Guy in your deck. And then you can also play like a Kyloria or a Yendurai, and then get 3 value, attack with that dragon, and then continually like also attack with your like Ashwings or whatever other dragons you have, or a Chain Ender like a Snatch or whatever.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and so basically that was primarily just a KO tech card. I also end up running it into Levia, and then I don't have more time to test this because the hero's gone, but I was trying it out in Guardians and having moderate success with it. Because it just helps you kind of vomit out a big board where it's like, tome turn, I already have out like an Uvia or whatever, and then I can go Passing Mirage, Kyloria, Mirror Guy, instead of this like, you can kill 2 at max if you have like a Zealous Belting. But I have all these threats, and I'm just gonna like snowball and basically kill you.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so it's like because I mean, I guess when you're a hero that revolves around Phantasm and it revolves around all these kind of weird things, you do need to have like a little bit more board or a little bit more armor and like equipment to build your game plan. So it kind of makes sense. Should we run into the core of the deck? Like,
yeah, I mean, I can go through this pretty quickly. For the most part, other than the 2-cost dragons, basically all the 0 and 1-cost dragons you're going to play in every Dromai deck. The 2-cost dragons, that's actually a little bit where I vary from some other Dromai decks. Okay. So a lot of Dromai decks run 0 to 2 Uvia. I run the full 3 Uvia, and that's also because I run 3 Sweeping Blow Red. And so between Sweeping Blow Red and Invoke Uvia, I often have a lot of Ash. And so what that means is that I get to make very Ash negative plays because I'm not afraid of going to 0 Ash. I have 3 Tome of Imperial Flames and 3 Sweeping Blows in my deck. And what that means is that it's very easy for me to go, oh, it's the start of my turn. I'm fine going to 0 Ash to make an Ashwing off of Uvia because I have these Sweeping Blows left in my deck that are going to allow me to make more Ash. And so even though it's something like a 2-card 3, the way that I've kind of started mathing it out is Ash is worth about 1 value, the way that I think about it, because with 3 Uvias and 3 Rake the Embers in your deck, you're almost always going to be able to convert as much Ash as you want into Ashwings, and Ashwings are worth at the very, very least 1 value. But sometimes you get stuck with extra Ash and it's like not useful, so that's where I kind of pare down the number, where in theory it would be like every Ashwing is worth at least 2, because it's like you attack with it for 1 and then they attack it for 1. It's just like a 2-life swing effectively. But a lot of the time it's worth a lot more than that against decks that can't really clear them.
Yeah, and against like popping decks even, like an Ashwing is worth a whole card. Like that's a lot more than 1 most of the time. You know what I mean? I typically equate cards to 3 life, 3 value at the floor. So it's like an Ashwing sometimes is worth like 3. And then if they never kill it, Ashwing can be worth a lot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like when Lexi was legal, basically Rake the Embers, every Ashwing is worth like 6 value, because if they don't clear it, you just get to attack with it for 1 every single turn. And if they do clear it, they're sending a whole arrow at it. Like a lot of the time, like even if it's an endless arrow, that's 4 life that you gained and didn't have to block out.
It's like a D react in a tiny little Ashwing form. Okay.
Yeah, 2 card for 3/6 or whatever.
Yeah, it's wild. That's why illusionists are really warping a lot of the time. Is the value that they have is like, it doesn't translate to the other hero's value very well, right? Prism with ALS looping, Spectra, and then even, Dromai's dragons, right? Like a lot of the time they're basically, you're a hero that has like 1,000 life almost, because you have pretty much each one of these is a D-react. Every dragon kind of at some level is a D-react, maybe, 1, sometimes 4, but like when I have to kill a dragon with a card, it's a 6. It gives you 6 health, you know what I mean? So would you say like, I think the only 2, like you kind of pointed out, Invoke Uvia, I think I've always seen you really take advantage of this card when I play against you. And then you also run full 3 Thamai in the main board. Do you cut these out sometimes, or are they always there?
So a lot of people cut them out. I basically always keep them in. The only time that I cut them out is sometimes into like very aggressive popping matchups. Like
Okay.
I've toyed with cutting 1 or 2 copies into like Leviah or KO before.
Mm-hmm.
As it is, the sideboard's pretty tight, so I'm fine keeping them in just as a red 3 block because that's like basically the baseline of the deck.
Yeah.
Red 3 block is exactly what you're looking for. It makes you ash, it fuels your game plan, it blocks when you need it to. The biggest difference, the reason why I'm not playing a list like what Mara Ferris might play is because that deck has a lot of 2 blocks in it. And so when you get to this end game where it's like, I have 3 dragons, all I need to do is stay alive, and you draw a hand with 4 2 blocks in it, sometimes you just die. And that's almost never going to happen in this deck unless your opponent is setting up like a big 5-card power turn. And most of the time, they're going to be at least IP1 because they're going to have to pop a dragon if they're a popper deck. And if they're not a popper deck, they only have 2 or 3 turns of just eating all my damage before they have to start blocking.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so you got your 0-cost dragons. You know, we all know Dromai is super important, as well as a game ender by itself. Clyoria is probably one of the most dangerous dragons to let hit because it's just got so much value on it. You got your anti-popper tech, which is still super relevant in even non-popper decks, right? Like getting caught by the occasional random 6 from like a Rune Blade or something is like backbreaking.
Yeah, right? It's Mirror Guy is like one of the best dragons in the deck because the other thing is that 4 health is really awkward to kill.
It is.
And so what that means is that you just get to, as long as you have your sequencing down, basically the sequencing with Mirror Guy is that you just, whatever dragon you don't want to die, like you want them to spend the most effort killing, you just attack with Mirror Guy first, and then if they have their popper, you usually go like attack with Kyloria. That doesn't have Phantasm, and then I attack with my 3 Ashwings. If you want to then get to pop my Mirror Guy, you have to either block out or eat my Kyloria on hit, and then take my 3 Ashwings before you can pop my Mirror Guy.
Yeah, Mirror Guy is one of the most awkward cards for me to deal with. As a brew player, obviously, it's like designed for popper matchups, but you know, a lot of aggro decks would have a couple 6s sprinkled in, and they would just hope that 6 would show up on the right turn. And as soon as this card hits the table, that wish kind of just dies, right? Yenderai, the hardest dragon to kill naturally. So I mean, it makes sense. These are all very powerful, but you'll notice none of the legendary dragons, not even a Dominia in here. So you just didn't want to run the risk of bricking with them, basically?
Yeah, so basically they're very good on tome turns. The main thing that I was finding is Dominia is pretty good. I've seen lists similar to mine that just throw Dominia in there, and it's probably not that bad. But basically, off of my cards like Snatches and Kylorias and stuff like that, whenever I have like either Go Again naturally from Kyloria or like an extra action point or like Snapdragon Scalers, with this deck, if they let you draw a card, very often, without having to pitch an extra card, you can just throw that card out there. Like, for example, if you go, like, Rabble, Kyloria, they like the Kyloria hit, and then you already had, like, something else, you could easily draw another Rabble, and that Kyloria is instantly worth 4, that on hit is worth immediately 4 value. Or Dust Up is, like, immediate extra 4 value. And so I really wanted to maximize the number of cards that are going to be able to, I'm just automatically going to get value from them whenever my opponent lets me draw extra cards. Or like, I don't want to draw a Tomotai off of an E-Strike or whatever, because now that card is stuck in my arsenal until I draw a tome, and even if I do draw a tome, I have to keep 3 cards plus the Tomotai in my arsenal, so I only get to block with 1 card that cycle, which a lot of the time Dromai doesn't want to do. And the other thing was that I really like Tomotai into Lexi, because if you break I had a game during ProQuest season last season when Lexi was legal, where I was down like 15-30. I attacked with Tomotai, broke their mask, they popped it. So I was like, I have no dragons out. I'm down. I have half as much life as my opponent. But basically, they had to IP every turn for like 8 turns in a row, because if they arsenal a card, they can't fire 2 arrows because they only have 1 arsenal zone. But what I was finding is that into the ninjas, and like Tomotai is also, like, you can blow up Scabskin Leathers, you can blow up like Tunic, you can get a lot of value out of that card, but unless it's like fundamentally dealing with their game plan, and I wasn't finding that it was doing that into ninjas as much as I wanted, it gets a decent amount weaker.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, like, you're going for lean and like streamlined, right? Like, you're not really trying to risk a clunk hand, right? It totally makes sense to me. And then your other cards, you know, I think Burn Them All is one of the most powerful 0 cost ever printed in this game, right? It can do too much damage.
in my finals game this ProQuest season, I had a burn them all that went up to 8, and every single turn that burn them all was out, I attacked with the dragon. So it was effectively a 0 for 8. And a big part of the reason why my opponent was locked down that game is that I would go attack with an Ashwing, and then they would, because they wanted to keep their life level high, they would pitch a card to the burn them all, and then spend a card to pop an Ashwing. And so basically, without doing anything else, my opponent is effectively locked at 3-card hands, even including their arsenal, for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
If they want to not take damage, and if they're taking that chip damage, it makes it that much easier for me to have an endgame play.
Yeah, burn them all is wild, man. Like, it just does so much damage. And then CNC, I think this card needs no introduction. Okay, it's like one of the most overstated generics in the game. And then you got, speaking of second most overstated generic in the game, you got E-Strikes in here too. Yeah, and Dust Up, right? So like, what's your real game plan with like these 3 cards? Like how are you really trying to use them?
Yeah, so the best part about playing a deck with 60 reds in it is that Easter Draw is one of your best plays. It's effectively one card for 5 value almost every time, and sometimes you draw a little bit more awkward cards like maybe a Themai or an Uvia, but a lot of the time you go Easter draw a card, draw into like a Fate Foreseen, and you just got a 2-card 9. Like you just did the Bear Fangs thing, except for without having to be KO, which when you already get absurd numbers like Rake the Embers, right? Where a lot of the time that card is like it's like a 2-card 12 plus. And it's like even harder to evaluate because certain decks just can't clear them. Like you play a Rake the Embers against an Azalea turn 0, all you have to do is survive, and the Rake the Embers will win the game for you, effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. Each one of these cards is pretty much overstated. Like this is a 0 for 4 block 3 that creates pretty much 1 to, like you said, 10 value. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's a very clear theme going on here. It makes a lot of sense. And then you got your zero cost dragon enablers. I'm guessing with Ravenous, Burn Them All, Sigil of Solace, right? Like those are your kind of 0 cost starters, right?
Mm-hmm. Sigil and Ravenous are both really great. Rabble is just always a 0/4 in this deck. I don't run Bathing in that many matchups, maybe 3 or 4 maximum, and even then, I now have 57 reds in my deck instead of 60. And then Sigil of Solace has won me so many games. You get to do the classic, like they CNC you just Sigil, absolutely stuff like a Pummel turn, which is especially can be more threatening now that we're off Crown of Providence. Sigil is just such a good way to stay in the game once you have that board set up, where it's like it gets around dominate damage. You can throw it in Arsenal, and it's a D-react if you need it to be, or it turns on all your dragons and gets you out of that danger zone a lot of the time when you need it to be. It does so many things. It's such a great card.
Yeah. I mean, the theme of this deck is every card's basically worth more than what it should be, right? Even your blocking cards are the highest blocking rates in the game. You know what I mean? It's like every card in here is just statted. So I guess the more interesting part here is your sideboard. So here's where you start seeing something interesting. You start seeing like Pretending to be Fi down here a little bit. You see your Anti-Phantasm cards a little bit. And then you see your juicy Nourishing Emptiness. You want to give me a rundown of your sideboard?
Yeah. So for basically the bane of my existence while playing this deck has been Ninja, because they're really good at clearing your dragons and they're really good at killing you. And so the way that you have to beat Ninja is you basically just have to be Ninja back, except for I have access to Kyloria, and when we get to endgame, I can burst you down with Rake the Embers and Brooklyn. Yeah. And so basically, it's not like an amazing matchup, but if you run Rabble and you run Snatch and you run Blaze Headlong and you run stuff like Snapdragon Scalers, you can effectively take the matchup to like a slightly unweighted coin flip in their favor. But you also can just have pop-off turns where you go like Tome of Imperial Flame, Kyloria, attack with Kyloria, you have to block a Kyloria, and then I slam you with a CNC or whatever.
Yeah.
And like you also get to have those really strong on hits, as well as getting to play defense reactions, which most aggro decks don't get to do. And so you basically just try and play a numbers game, except for in a slightly more aggressive way, and one that's less focused on your dragons. And then for Dust from the Chrome Caverns, that's basically just a Guardian card. I was trying it into Brutes for a little bit, but it's mostly just a Guardian card. Both of my the ProQuest that I took down, I played against 2 victors, one in the 5th round of Swiss and one in the finals. And both games, the way that I beat them was whenever I saw Dust first cycle, I played it. Whenever I saw a Chromai first cycle, I pitched it. And then both games, I ended up closing with a triple Chromai pitch deck, where you go, ideally you have a mirror guy out, but you don't even need to have a mirror guy out. If you have a mirror guy out, what you can do is you can go Chromai into regular Ash, attack with Chromai, you have 2 action points, and then usually I like spread it out so that they don't necessarily know, although they really know once I start playing out Chromais.
Yeah.
But basically you go up to 4 action points, and they have to they have to take minimum of like 10 damage if you have a burn them all out, and have 4 poppers just to stop your board. And if they do that, you get to keep all 3 Chromais for the following turn, and then you just murder them with attack actions. So basically on the pop-off turn, you're presenting usually 30 plus damage, and usually your opponent does not have 4 poppers in their hand. And even if they do have 4 poppers in their hand, most of the time they can't do enough to really shut it down. And so basically in my finals match, I set up my board. I had 4 or 5 Ashwings out and a smattering of other dragons. I played out 3 Chromais, I attacked with all my dragons. They didn't have 4 poppers in hand. They took 20 damage, lost their whole hand, and then I killed them the following turn. And that's basically, you set up this like kind of Kano OTK stack where it's super easy. Literally all you have to do is, if you see dust, you play it, and if you see Chromai, you pitch it, and hopefully it depends on your draw sequence a little bit, but ideally you set up it in such a way where you pitch like 1, and then you pitch the other 2 kind of close to one another, where you can go Arsenal 1, and then maybe wait a couple turns, and then draw the other 2 in the same hand, and then you just go off.
I like it. And then Nourishing Emptiness, right? So Dromai being one of the only classes that can also do this, alongside like, I guess, Kasai right now, right? Is you can burn off all of your graveyard to turn on Nourishing Emptiness multiple times. How often do you actually do that? I mean, like, you're running 3, so it's got to be pretty...
Yeah, so I went up to 3 recently. I was running a Billowing Mirage in that spot before, but I've been really enjoying the Nourishing effect. Nourishing is just another reason to go first, because since you're running Crown Dominion in every matchup, basically with the gold, you can get 2 free Ash. But what you can also do is you can play Nourishing, get the 2 free Ash anyway, and you get to draw 5 cards, unless your opponent wants to expend armor on the first turn of the game.
Yeah.
And so the way the math breaks down, it's the same as Cast Bones. Your chance of drawing a Nourishing if you're going first is I think it's about 20%, which is pretty good odds, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's also really, really easy to set it up in games that go longer. Again, in my finals game, the way that I won the game was I went Tome of Imperial Flame, draw some cards. The rest of my hand after I played the Tome was Nourishing Emptiness and 3 Chromais. I played out all my Chromais. They didn't have 4 poppers, which meant that I got to have an action point at the end of the combat chain. And then I ended with a Nourishing for 6 Dominate, which forced them to give me their last card, which meant they couldn't even hammer down a Chromai, and drew me up to 5 cards the following turn.
Oof. Yeah. I've seen a lot of this card played now with Kasai, so yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you can even do it in like mid game, and it's like quite easy to do. All you have to do is just banish your attack actions whenever you play out a Burn Them All in the middle of the game. And like playing out a Burn Them All in the middle of the game isn't even that bad, because it's often 0 for 4 or 0 for 5, even if you know you're going to play multiple in one game.
Yeah.
And it also, the 2 cost might seem very prohibitive, but it's not that bad when you consider the cost curve of the deck, because you can very easily go 1 cost, pitch into Flame Scale, make 2 resources, and then have this as your chain.
Yeah, I like it. I like the strategy there. It's kind of dirty. Every one of the broken cards basically sitting in Dromai's deck. And then you got Sand Cover as your final card. I mean, like, it's a 0 for 4 D-React that also stops Kano, right? Like, when were you taking
it's really good at stuffing CNC Pummel. That's a really nice perk of it. It's really good into Azalea. I've found that like if it goes to endgame, you can against Guardians, you can just kill them with the triple Chromai. And if they try to aggro you, if you have 9 D-Reacts and 3 Sigils, it's really hard for them to do that. And then same with Azalea, they basically just have to full blitz you down before you set up your board. And Sand Cover is a good way to stop that. Like I had a game in Top Cut where I believe it was my semifinals where I played against an Azalea. Turn 0, I set up a Nourishing, and then I arsenal a Sand Cover. And then on their first turn, they send a Dominated Red in the Ledger for 14. And I'm able to stuff it by going Flame Scale, D-React, Sand Cover. Or D-React, Sand Cover, because it was dominated. But yeah. I was able to stuff a 14 damage arrow with off the back of Sand Cover, where you just couldn't do that otherwise.
Yeah, when I used to play Big Dragon Dromai for a minute, and some of the turns I'd get like a sand cover play. I think I was playing against Davis on Dawnblade. He had like 7 counters or something ridiculous, and I just drew it. I drew all of my D-reacts, and I was just like, you know, D-react, sand cover, and I stopped his entire counter train and then killed him. It was like, it's just crazy what you can do with some of these cards. So, I mean, now that Dromai's gone, right? What would you like to see in the version 2 of Dromai? Like, if you could, you know, like what do you think would be a healthy take on the new version of her?
Yeah. So right now, I think it's definitely was true when she was legal that since some of these more powerful heroes kind of left the game, like Icelander, Lexi, Oldhim, she was definitely a lot more powerful than a lot of the decks around her, especially without disruption to punish her, like Redline Nature. Personally, I really enjoyed like a more Big Dragon version of the deck. What I've heard a lot of people talking about is maybe having her new hero have to do a lot more with the dusts. So you remove that kind of phantasm aspect, but it's a lot more like inefficient to set out. And then maybe something to do with like, as it is, having every single dragon have go again. It feels very like Fab 1.0 design, where it's like action points everywhere. Same thing. I mean, a little bit with Scouting Layers, but a little bit different. Same thing with like Chain or like OG Luminaris, which like everything has go again. All your cards have go again. You can just do as many things as you want, and then you also get to play these nuts cards like Snatch or Dust Up or whatever. And so maybe something a little bit similar to what Prism has, where it's like you get a free Angel with go again, and then you get a Herald with go again. Maybe something like that. And then I've heard something similar to the way the Prism functions, where you get to tutor dusts out of your deck upon some kind of condition. I'm not exactly sure what that would look like. It feels very similar to how Prism would function. But I think the dusts are definitely an interesting twist, because it also means that cards like Sweeping Blow are going to be interesting, because it's like, it's your only real way to make Ash. But your dragons are actually going to have Phantasm now. Because other than like Sweeping Blow or like Dust Up, those are really your only ways to make Ash outside of the hero ability. And so it'll be interesting to see how the new Dromai goes. But I think it'll definitely happen. James White has said that they're going to make a new Dromai because there are a lot of Dromai fans. But it'll be interesting to see what they cook up for the new hero.
Yeah, even if it was like some sort of deck building requirement, like it costs something to give your dragons go again, because it would be interesting if you had to pay for the go again, like 1 for each dragon, or if it was like you could even pay Ash maybe. Ash generation would be a little tight, but you know what I mean, like, because then at least you'd have to think about, okay, like I need some blues for my deck to function. I still want it to be mostly red, but I want to pay for my go. I don't know. It could be something interesting. But Prism 2 is so different from Prism 1 that we're sure that they're going to cook something crazy, right?
Yeah, I just hope they don't give her 32 health. That's all I'm praying for.
Yeah, I don't think dragons are as inherently powerful as Spectra is. So, like, I guess they got rid of Spectra as the main attacking component of Prism 2, but like it's still very much there. You know what I mean? Like, still exists. And so I don't know. Okay, so any closing thoughts about the list, or the future of Illusionists and Flesh and Blood? Do you like the direction they've headed with Prism 2? Do you think what are your hopes on this new one? Maybe this blue Illusionist.
So I haven't seen. I mean, Enigma. We've seen most of the Transcend cards. We haven't seen a lot outside of the Transcend cards when it comes to Dromai. But basically, for the most part, I think that like an Iris build would be really interesting. It's something that I would find fun. But I think that most Iris builds would probably lean, at least to a degree, towards Spectra, because you get Shimmers of Silver, you get Haze Bending, you get all these like really good cards. And so I think they're probably going to move away from that, as much as it breaks my heart.
Actually, yeah, probably,
but yeah, it's going to be tough seeing how the future of Dromai and other Illusionists unfolds, but we'll be here for it. We'll see how it goes.
I'm a little worried, honestly, about blue decks. You know what I mean? So like, I've always kind of felt that the streamlined deck building heroes, like Phi, all red, Dromai, all red, and then Prism is a little bit of an exception because yellow's not exactly the best color to work with, but I feel like blue decks, especially, like if a blue deck is good, what's their weakness? You know what I mean? Every card pitches for the maximum amount. They have maximum AB ability. They have, and then if they can keep up on damage somehow, like I'm pretty worried about blue decks, to be honest. Like the idea of powerful blue decks, like Icelander was so annoying because all of her cards were strong and they were blue. So it's like she never ran into a clunky hand. You know what I mean? Like, and I felt kind of the same when like the Empress Dromai was coming out, or like, and I especially felt it when Phi was around. It's like, okay, well, he's still around, but it's like every one of your cards is the most powerful version of what it is, and you're still really strong. And then same thing with the Icelander. It's like every one of your cards is blue, and yet you're still really strong. So I'm kind of worried about blue heroes, to be very honest. I'm kind of worried about it.
I think the trade-off they're kind of going with Enigma is that all of her cards are instants, so she cannot block. It's the same thing with Prism. Like none of her cards block, although she has 40 health, which is like 40 health is a lot more than 32.
Yes.
Like you basically, it's like 3 Sigils of Solaces that you're getting every single game, or at least like you feel the loss of it. I guess. Sure. But I think she's not going to be able to block as well. We'll have to see. I think they're trying to be more cautious just because we had OG Prism, which is kind of dominating the meta, and then we had Dromai, which took her a while, but she dominated the meta until she was gone, and then we have New Prism, which is kind of dominating the meta. So I mean,
yeah, the illusionists, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think this last week she was like top 3 in terms of ProQuest wins. Mm-hmm. So that's not. I mean, she didn't like put a bunch of copies in the top 8 of like Pro Tours or Callings or whatever. But
I mean, she definitely did, right?
And yeah. I mean,
I also think it's the illusionist problem, right? Dromai Prism 1 wasn't that strong until they figured her out. Dromai wasn't that strong until they figured her out. And Prism hasn't been around that long, and they're figuring her out, right? Illusionists, like, the more time people have on Illusionists, the scarier they get, because they just get so optimized, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. Well, thanks for coming on the channel, Jude. You know, it'll be sick when I see your name on Rhinar next. Then we can come talk about your performance on Rhinar. Can't wait to do that.
Of course. I got one more ProQuest this weekend, and then one more the next weekend. And then, I mean, not any more competitive seasons for a bit after that, but I'll be at Nationals. I'll be at Pro Tour, of course. And we'll see if I end up bringing Rhinar, but if I do, I'm definitely trying to get some points on her.
Let's do it. And if you win, we'll bring Sean on the channel too, so we can.
Of course.
He can watch your deck tech in real time. Okay. All right. Thanks, dude. Thanks for coming on the channel. We'll see you around, everybody.
Good to see you.
This is the final Dromai deck tech ever. I've claimed it. Have a good day. Bye.